Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 3rd of November of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Avdiivka direction, about the northern flank. Today we have a lot of geolocations and so on. Most of the mappers, either the Russians, Western, pro-Ukrainian, have already updated their maps showing this small triangle between these tree line and the railways as the territory under Russian control. And for example, Syriac Maps has already also updated their map. We got some video from Ukrainian sources. This is not the video that took place exactly today. This is like a series of video, so lots of attempts from Russian side to attack from different direction. And as I understand, based on this video, most of the mappers have updated their map. So maybe this is true, maybe it's not very difficult to understand, but anyway, according to the sources we have currently, there are very heavy clashes either along the railways or on the territory that is under Ukraine control, so let's say on the left side of the railways. For example, some Russian sources on the ground are saying that the Russians have already entered the city the village by the name of Stepova or Petrovska, according to the Russian language. So as I understand, based on that information, the Russians crossed the area somewhere here and entered the village. And currently, the Russians are trying to dig in deeper on the Ukrainian side of the railways, trying to prepare a very stronghold and reliable foothold for further offensive operation. We haven't received any geolocations from the village, but the only thing I know for sure, and if we increase the number of updates since the beginning of November, we're gonna see that the main Ukrainian losses took place exactly in this area. If you remember, like on the 2nd of November, on the 1st of November, we got the video how the Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian armored vehicles, Bradleys, along the railways exactly in this area. So this video was geolocated on the 1st of November. On the same date, on the 1st of November, we got the video of destroyed Ukrainian Leopard and also 3 Bradleys, one at the same area with the Leopard and at the same area with the Russians who were attacking the Ukrainian armored vehicles with anti-tank missiles, and 2 more Bradleys on the north in direction of Stepova, one inside of the village and another one a little bit further on the top of these tree lines. So this area was the area of the fierce clashes and battles that took place from the 1st of November till, let's say, the 3rd of November. And as a result of those clashes, according to some Russian sources, the Russians managed to penetrate this area and to enter the village by the name of Stepova. So this is the result. If it's true, anyway, sooner or later we're going to receive more updates and more confirmation of that. So let's wait a little bit, but if it's not true, anyway the Ukrainians will publish maybe their own videos from this direction. Very interesting updates are coming from the southern direction, from the area between Tonenka and Severna. We have already discussed these videos in the previous show. On this video, we see how the Russians were attacking the abandoned Ukrainian armored vehicles. So a few words that the Russians launched another artillery and FPV drone preparation of this territory for upcoming offensive operation. I expect that maybe this weekend the Russians will make an attack, a very short one. This is going to be not a very long or big battle that are going to take place for many days, just a few days of clashes, something like reconnaissance in combat in force, or maybe like active type of defense to capture more territories and other tree lines and the strongholds. And the main goal, as we discussed, as we understand, is to establish control over the villages like Tonenka and Severna. Of course, when talking about this map, this is a very huge progress the Russians want to achieve, but this is their primary goal. And if the Russians can do the progress on the top and on the south, we understand that this is going to be the beginning of the Avdiivka cauldron, because the distance between these two positions is going to be up to a little bit less than 7 kilometers. And this is about the northern direction and the southwestern direction, but very interesting updates are coming from the southern direction of Avdiivka, from the line, from defense belt that the Ukrainians created in 2014 during the first phase of Donbas conflict. There are a lot of trenches, as you can as you can see these lines on the map, a lot of fortifications from both sides, either from the Russians and from the Ukrainian one. So everything here is very well trenched, and there are lots of lines of defense belt, and it's like highly unlikely either the Russians or the Ukrainians have possibilities to penetrate enemies' defense belt. So there were no chances to use, let's say, ground operation or any type of operation. There is no just using just nuclear weapon you can penetrate this or that defense belt. But the Russians found a very interesting solution, and they published the entire video of that. The Russians somehow managed to find a way how to create underground tunnel. And they built, according to this video, according to this resource, around 160 meters tunnel below the Ukrainian positions. So from Russian position to Ukrainian position. And when the Russians managed to get the Ukrainian edge position, they mined this territory. They brought significant number of explosive, and this is the tunnel. This is the Donbas soldier who was making that this is the area of coal mines, and every second man in this area is a coal miner. So it's not a problem for them how to build tunnels, how to do all these things, how to work with this equipment. And on this video we see the moment of explosion. So the Russians build a tunnel, they mine the Ukrainian positions, and after that we see a very powerful explosion. So one more time, the distance of the tunnel was around 160 meters. So if we calculate the distance, so the Russians started the creation of the tunnel somewhere here, and the explosion took place somewhere here. So this is exactly 160 meters. But few things we need to understand. First of all, the tunnel wasn't destroyed. The fortification was destroyed. The tunnel still exists, and now there is a tunnel and a very big hole on the place where the Ukrainians had their first fortification like a day before. So now the Russians can send their infantry and their forces in this position along the tunnel, and they can make something like a landing operation from underground, from hell or something like this. So we haven't received any updates about Russian progress, about Russian landing operation, but as I understand, that material, video was provided exactly for these purposes. And furthermore, during the previous days, starting from the 1st of November, we got some updates that the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to develop their positions, to capture new tree lines, to capture new fortifications on the south. And as I understand, that operation with the tunnel of destroying Ukrainian fortifications from underground was a part of that offensive operation on the south. So if the Russians are able and were able to penetrate the Ukrainian defense belt on the south, obviously this is an epic fail of the Ukrainian forces, and we are going to receive more clashes and more attempts to attack, and anywhere we're going to see how the Ukrainian forces withdrawing their position from this territory. So this is about Donetsk direction. Now let's move to the south. We got some updates from this territory as well. The Russians continue bombardment of Novomikhailivka after a few days of very heavy clashes on the south, where the Russians were using demining equipment, infantry. The Russians had some progress, but they paid a very big price for that. The Russians took a decision to make a small operational pause. So during this pause, they're bombing this village with guided bombs, FAB 500. Also, we got more details from the Battle of Mykolaiv. The Ukrainian sources and the Russian sources published some video of some episodes of that battle, and on that according to these episodes, we see that the Russians did lost armored vehicles, and the Ukrainians according to this video also knew everything from the beginning. And as you can see, this is the icon of 72nd Mechanized Brigade. So the Ukrainians managed to discover this plan before the Russians start the main phase of operation. They control everything. Maybe there was like a rat in the or a spy among the Russian soldiers, but the Ukrainians know for sure when exactly the Russians were planning to start, and they created an ambush, and the Russians, probably the fourth attempt to storm Ugledar, failed. Now we're moving to Vremivka tactical bridgehead. Probably this is the second or third day in a row when the Russians are showing some activity from their side. On the 2nd of November, we got the video, a very long video of 10 minutes, how the Russians were clearing the trenches on the west of Staromayorsk. And as a result of those clashes, the Russians managed to establish control over this fortification and stronghold. Today, we got the video how the Russian tank were storming and attacking the Ukraine positions along this tree line. And as a result of that attack, the Ukrainians probably lost their positions and were forced to step back. So basically, according to geolocations, we can build a small schema. The Russians during the previous weeks managed to develop their positions along this small salient. They captured these tree lines and started movements to the east in direction of Staromayorsk. Now the Russians also tried to clear every single tree line along this fortification belt, and when talking about the global scope, we understand that the Russians are moving to the east as close as possible to this village. I don't think that the Russians are planning to counterattack Makarovka, Staromayorsk, or Rozhaina. I'm not sure that the Russians are going to return control over these territories, but the thing that I understand that the Russians are planning to, before winter comes, before before the bad weather comes, the Russians want to return control and to establish their positions along this natural barrier, like in face of this river. So as you can see, there is a river that goes on the north of Priyutina, and this is like a perfect position before the winter comes. The Ukrainians won't be able to counterattack because of this natural barrier, and the Russians will improve their positions and they will be able to prepare themselves before the military campaign of 2024. And I'll remind you that during the previous months, during October, the Russians managed to achieve significant results on the north of Priyutina. We haven't received a lot of geolocations, a lot of videos, but according to reports we had, the Russians attacked this fortification and this tree line on the north of Priyutina, and there are very high chances that currently this territory is under Russian control. We don't have 100% proofs of that, so that's why we are not coloring this territory and we try to keep this area in the gray zone. But maybe they have already entered, and so now we see that most of this white cloud is already under Russian control. Now we are moving to Zaporizhzhia direction. We haven't received almost anything from this area, just few geolocations from the Ukrainian side, and just one geolocation from Ukrainian side and one geolocation from the Russian side. On this video we see how the Ukrainian 82nd Brigade managed to discover the Russian position somewhere in the tree lines on the south of Verbova, some mortar positions, and as a result of FPV drone strike, few Russian artillery positions were destroyed. So nothing special, just a regular military routine. And the same situation on Robotina. The Russians, if you remember, the Ukrainians, as a result of clashes during the previous days, abandoned significant number of armored vehicles. The Russians understand that sooner or later, if the Russians are not going to do anything, the Ukrainians will evacuate and repair these armored vehicles. So that's why the Russians took a decision to destroy everything and not to allow the Ukrainians to restore these abandoned armored vehicles. Now we are moving to Kherson direction. The clashes continues on the Russian bank of the river. The situation is getting worse and worse every single day. If we increase the number of days since the beginning of October, we're going to see one more time the concentration of Ukrainian FPV drone strikes on the line between Krynki, Korsunka and Novolagery. We understand that this is the Ukrainian pattern. They try to prepare the foothold for further offensive operation, but yet the Ukrainians are not ready for this offensive operation, because to do a very big attack, first of all, they need to concentrate forces on their own bank of the river. Furthermore, they need to have significant number of boats. The Ministry of Defense reported that during the previous week, the Russians destroyed up to around 30 boats that Ukrainians were using for those landing operations, and now they need to wait maybe for new portion of these boats or something like this. But while the Ukrainians are waiting, while the Ukrainians try to concentrate forces, the Russians are bombing them heavily with FAB 500. Another episode of the usage of FAB 500 against the Ukrainian positions in the villages between Mykolaiivka, Burgunka and Lvova. So let's follow the situation. From one side, the Russians haven't managed to force the Ukrainians to step back, but from the other side, the Ukrainians haven't managed to develop their foothold. So there's 50-50 situation, but anyway, sooner or later, it can't go the same way. It can't go endless. Anyway, sooner or later, somebody should get initiative and start advancing advancing. Now we're going to return back to Bakhmut direction. We got some updates from this territory as well. The Russians during the previous days also launched a series of active defense attacks, let's call it like this, along the railways from Berkhovka to Bogdanovka. And as a result of those clashes, according to the sources on the ground, the Russians managed to improve their positions along the Berkhovka Reservoir and to establish control over the gray zone, or maybe fortifications and tree lines in this area, and got very close to the Ukrainian positions on these railways. So the Russians are improving their area, trying to attack, and you know that when talking about this northern flank, there is a very big problem for the Ukrainians. First of all, you need to understand that this area was under the responsibilities of a lot of brigades, like 30th Brigade, 115th Brigade mechanized, of 77th Air Mobile, and 57th Motorized, 56th Motorized Brigade, and 50% of these brigades were already redeployed to Kupiansk direction. And this area, exactly this area, was under protection of 57th and 56th, and currently there is just 56th Brigade left, and 57th was redeployed to Kupiansk. So there are a lot of holes in Ukrainian defense belt, and the Russians took a decision to use this situation for counterattacks, and those attacks in Berkhovka were something like reconnaissance and force in combat. And if the Russians understand and realize that Ukrainians do have problems, they will launch a much powerful attack with the purpose to get Chasov Yar and Canal. So we'll see, maybe the Russians can do this, or maybe they're not. When talking about Kupiansk-Liman front line, we continue receiving updates of bombardments along the line between Makeivka and Tarske, and on this area the Russians also were using different types of weapon. This is the usage of self-navigated Lemur missile, and the Russians, as a result of that attack, managed to damage or destroy the headquarters or positions of 25th Air Mobile Brigade of Ukrainian Forces, Airborne Brigade. This is like a veteran brigade that fight since the beginning, probably, of the special military operation. One of the most experienced, well trained, but it didn't help them to hide and to run away from Russian self-navigated Lemur missile or product 305. On the south, the Russians continue bombardments of the main supply roads between left and the right banks of Zherebets River. On this video we see another usage of FAB 500. One more time, just yesterday we saw the same strikes at the same area, from another angle, from another time, but the Russians are very focused, and currently we need to expect another attempt of attack in this direction. Some not very positive updates are coming from the line between Rogorodka-Svatova. This area where the Ukrainians, as I understand, managed to get some initiative. During the previous months, the Ukrainians destroyed significant number of armored vehicles of Russian forces. On this video, we see how the Ukrainians discovered the squad, the platoon of Russian forces of 5 soldiers, and as a result of anti-tank missile, the Ukrainians managed to destroy the Russian soldiers. There are a few interesting things and in this video, and probably the most important is to understand and to geolocate the position of Ukrainian forces who attacked. This is the area where the Russians were hit, but the question is where the Ukrainians were, from which hill the Ukrainians were attacking this area. And the distance, let's say, from Nadia, to these positions is around 3 kilometers. So I think that Ukrainians were closer. So there were updates that Ukrainians managed to counterattack in this area and to return some positions, but maybe the map, at least on this front line, is not correspond to the reality. So we're gonna keep and wait for more updates, and if necessary we will update this territory according to closer to reality. On Kupiansk direction there are no changes on the ground, just few videos of that allow us to geolocate the real Russian positions. During the previous night, the Russians launched a very powerful and one of the biggest attacks against the Ukrainian infrastructure using Gran. The explosions and missiles in Gran. The explosions took place in Kharkiv, and as a result of strike in Kharkiv, according to the Russian sources, the Russians managed to destroy the Ukrainian Kraken position, the headquarters of Ukrainian Kraken special unit. And this may be this is the results of the strike. As you can see, obviously, if there there were anything inside of this building. Obviously, everything was destroyed and buried under the ruins of this building. So this is the headquarters of Kraken forces. Also, the Russians were bombing and attacked during the previous night the Ukrainian forces in the airfield in the vicinity of Krapivnitsky. And as a result of that strike, another Ukrainian Su-27 that was modernized and upgraded for the usage of Storm Shadow was destroyed. Furthermore, the strikes and attacks of Gerань and missiles took place in Odessa, and as a result of that attack, the Russians were attacking this area with Onyx missiles, and the sources are saying that maybe the Russians managed to destroy the warehouse of Ukrainian Neptune missiles, and as a result of those strikes, there were a lot of secondary detonations or something like this. But one more time, the Russians still haven't launched any attacks against the Ukrainian, let's say, energy facilities. Furthermore, the farthest attack, the most farthest point of Russian attack was the military center in the vicinity of Lvov. As a result of that strike, there were a lot of casualties among the military, among the soldiers, military experts, the instructors and teachers, and there were a lot of updates that there were a lot of cars were moving in direction of Poland into hospitals. So as you can see, the Russians don't have any problems to get any target all over the entire Ukraine, and still we haven't seen, I don't remember when the last time we saw the usage of calibers. One more thing, and probably the Russians have concentrated and collected up to 1,000 calibers, and we need to understand that they're keeping them for important day, and as I understand, this day is going to start very soon. And that's it for this video. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.